86 Returning once more 4. Chapter 86. Returning once more 4. A low, humming sound, whung, echoed softly as a wave rippled across the field. But its impact was anything but soft. Demiurge immediately frowned. The gate spell he'd been about to open didn't activate. It wasn't cancelled, it was rejected. Not dispelled after being cast, but refused before it even formed. A strange, crawling sensation, like reality itself, had denied the spell's existence. He had never felt anything like it. Magic not interfered with, but repelled. And that unpleasant feeling, it was as if something completely opposite to his own nature was interfering. The polar opposite of a demon, extreme sanctity, holy alignment. This is dangerous. Demiurge instantly began assessing the situation. But before he could act further, his gaze fell on the boy slowly rising before him. He hadn't noticed him earlier, not because the boy had hidden, but because Demiurge's perception had been forced to ignore him. He hadn't just missed seeing him, he had been prevented from doing so. Impossible. No mere mortal could conceal themselves from the eyes of a guardian of Nazareth. To evade his perception entirely was something even mightier divine beings struggled to achieve. And yet, this boy had done it effortlessly. He realized it then, this wasn't coincidence. Those three adventurers hadn't returned out of blind loyalty or desperation. They had returned because they had insurance. Demiurge grimaced inwardly. A demon like me, got careless. He had been too confident. Everything had been proceeding according to plan, and in that ease, he had relaxed. The boy's sudden appearance, the blocked teleportation, it all lined up. A trap, then. Demiurge clicked his tongue internally. This was bad. He might be one of the floor guardians, but in direct combat, his power ranked among the lowest. He survived by wit and guile, by strategy, not brute strength. If this turned into a fight, he would need every trick Ain Sama had granted him just to escape. First, gather intel. Then use the contingency artifact to retreat and report. He rolled his crystalline eyes, calculating every possible outcome. And then the boy, Tiamat, stood. You called yourself Yaldabaoth, didn't you? Yes. And who might you be? For now, Demiurge played along. If escape wasn't possible yet, information was his only weapon. He needed to know what this being was before making his move. But instead of answering, the boy said something baffling. Yaldabaoth, huh? Funny, I know someone who looks just like you, but that's not his name. If I'm mistaken, well, my bad. Quote question mark exclamation mark quote. What nonsense was this? He was Yaldabaoth, or rather, the persona Ain Sama had created for him. Who was this boy speaking of? How could there be another? And you are Yaldabaoth, never heard of that one. But you look a lot like someone I know. You've got that Dominion word class ability, right? Heightier command speech. So, you're definitely a demon type. Still, different name, Did you guys cross over from another guild server or something? Copying avatar data was trendy back in the day, so I guess it's not that weird. Demiurge froze. It sounded like conversation, but it wasn't. They weren't communicating at all. Even as the boy's eyes looked at him, they didn't see him. They were looking through him, past him. As if the boy were conversing with someone else entirely. For the first time in ages, genuine fear trickled down Demiurge's spine. Just what was this boy? Meanwhile, the boy, Tiamat, rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his dark eyes fixed on Demiurge. Muttering as if to himself. So what are you, exactly? Where did you come from? And who sent you? If you'd just answer honestly, I'd appreciate it. But considering NPC loyalty coding, that's probably not going to happen. In that case, guess we'll have to follow standard GBR protocol, guild battle rules. Not Yggdrasil anymore, but I might as well make it look proper. What on earth are you talking about? Demiurge's composure faltered. His instincts screamed chaos. Something was wrong, profoundly wrong. Even when standing before beings like Ain Sama. Even before other guardians, he had never felt a presence quite like this. It was as if this boy were looking at the world from another layer of reality entirely. Demiurge already understood it in full. Well, since I've already lost the initiative, there's no point in lingering. If I die, a report will be sent anyway, so, might as well take one of them down with me. Don't tell me. The boy's gaze sharpened. That single look, brimming with killing intent, froze Demiurge to the core. Just like the three adventurers earlier, now it was his turn to feel that suffocating dread. Those words, that gaze, everything about this boy screamed of something alien. And in that instant, the demon's brilliant mind accelerated. Countless scenarios, hypotheses, and outcomes flashed through his thoughts like lightning, then scattered like stars in a storm. Something beyond comprehension stood before him. And as his reasoning followed every possible thread, the pale-skinned demon's face shifted colors in rapid succession. From its natural white, to the blue of shock, to the red of confusion and anger, and finally, to the pitch black of terror. Then, without a word, Demiurge moved. Not even the faintest sound escaped his lips as wings burst violently from his back, tearing through the roof as he shot upward into the sky. Crash! The roof shattered like paper as he ascended, the wind screaming around him. His mind was filled with only one thought. A being, on par with the supreme beings. He had used Rot as bait to lure the remnants of Dragon's Dream, the surviving members of the Adamantite-ranked adventurer party that had escaped his net. So far, the plan had been flawless. That clan's legacy, their wealth, their power, all would soon belong to the great tomb of Nazareth. But the enemy had turned the tables. They had taken his bait and crafted a trap around him. This wasn't the work of mere mortals. The opposing side had someone who matched him in cunning, or worse, someone who could see the entire battlefield from above. And that presence, the one orchestrating this trap. The aura emanating from that boy. No. Impossible. Yet his instincts screamed otherwise. Player. He had to report this. Even if he died, he had to bring this truth to his beloved master, Ainzul Gaon, and the denizens of Nazareth. The enemy was not just remnants. The adventurer clan they had crushed was merely a fragment, a sliver of the real force behind them. The true enemy was vast, organized, intelligent, and worst of all, divine. The great tomb was being deceived. Somewhere out there, beyond the fog of this world, stood other players. And the knowledge of that alone could change the course of the entire world. This isn't looting. It's war. If Nazareth didn't realize that soon, it could be their ruin. He had to warn Ains Sama, no matter what it cost. Teleportation was blocked. Dimensional gates were sealed. He was caught in an obvious trap, but it didn't matter. If he couldn't teleport, he would fly. Fortunately, the royal capital, Re-Estais, wasn't far. With all the strength in his wings, he soared upward like a meteor, racing toward the distant castle. But his resolve met its limit sooner than he'd expected. Well, going somewhere. Something bright and magnificent burst out of the sky before him, cutting through the barrier effortlessly. Your face doesn't ring a bell, but still, it's good to see you again. You. Demiurge's eyes went wide. The moon had already risen, bathing the world in silver. Under that moonlight, the figure that appeared was wreathed in gold, fur shimmering, muscles coiled, and eyes burning with primal light. A great beastman, radiant beneath the night sky. A being who had once defied even death itself. You, how are you still alive? Before that, where do you think you're going, on such a lovely night? No, never mind that. Judging from your face, it seems you do remember me. The furred giant, his savage grin twisting his already fearsome face, blocked Demiurge's path in the air. Like a wall of golden flame. From the very start he seemed intent on giving his all. The hair all over his body stood on end as shivering golden sparks ran across his pelt. The hidden skill that momentarily maximizes all his abilities activated, and his figure, which had already been burning gold, became a flash of brilliance. His name was Monkey Spanner. One of the 12 high priests of the Shinshi, and the former head of Dragon's Dream. That he had come back alive and appeared here proved, beyond doubt, who their opponent was. Altar of the Demons, Arm of the Vast. Eat this. Monkey Spanner flipped through the air and charged. In an instant he avoided Demiurge's grotesquely swollen, rope-twisted, muscular arm with a lithe movement that belied his size, slipped in close, and closed on the demon. Both were 100-level NPCs, but the difference in combat capability between Demiurge, a magic caster type built more for concept than frontline fighting, and Monkey Spanner, an all-arounder made for combat who even inherited his master's hidden class, was a gulf that couldn't be bridged. He struck, then drove himself in. Locking eyes with the stunned demon, Monkey Spanner slammed a fury-filled blow straight into the demon's chest. Goo. Die. No, don't you dare actually die. The huge simian humanoid's golden eyes scattered red streams of rage. He didn't even remember his own death clearly, but he understood that the demon before him had been involved in that vanished memory of his end. The shock in the demon's face when it saw him proved it. Kill them. Those bastards who mocked him, who stole his departed master's legacy, he would never forgive them. He would kill them. Even if they revived him, he'd slay them again. He would take back his master's inheritance. Monkey Spanner's eyes burned with hatred and fury. But he mustn't kill outright. Death would be too merciful. So Monkey Spanner put everything allowed within his remit into a single, maximal strike. And that was not the end. After the meteor-like destructive force of the punch, vast celestial energy that ran through his body and golden electric light flowing over his pelt converged at his fist and detonated in a secondary explosion. True lightning brain fist. Cog. Thrown backward and inverted, Demiurge plummeted to the ground at a speed several times greater than his ascent. Instead of pursuing the falling demon, Monkey Spanner scowled and spat. Ah, I wanted to finish you with my own hands. That is beyond your authority. You know that, right? Ah, yes, I know. A whisper in his ear, the voice of the shrine maiden, Aya, made Monkey Spanner click his tongue quietly. 5 of the Shinshi's priests had been dispatched for this operation. Leaving only the minimum number needed to keep the city and its duties running, all the other priests were deployed. That Monkey Spanner happened to be the priest who'd taken the offensive side was lucky, at least he'd been able to get in one blow of revenge. He flexed and unclenched his fist, still savoring the feeling. Well, the rest will be handled by the god. Regretfully, finishing the job properly was the role of the one he revered. Accepting that, Monkey Spanner turned to return to his position. 87, returning once more 5. Chapter 87. Returning once more 5. Tiamat simply rubbed his chin as the demon suddenly spread his wings and burst through the roof. Only when the noise faded did Dean and the others, their bodies finally freed from paralysis, gasp for air and collapse trembling to the floor. But their movements didn't reach Tiamat's eyes. He was looking upward. Looks like it went well, Aya. Yes, Master. The lockdown is complete. Hearing Aya's clear voice in his ear, Tiamat smiled. He hadn't planned to lure the enemy into a trap from the beginning, it had only been insurance. He'd simply set up precautions, deployed NPCs just in case something might happen. If he could gain information, all the better. If the enemy attacked, he'd capture them. Perhaps they'd even send a significant force. Nothing more than a contingency plan. The only thing was that his precaution consisted of some of the strongest forces among the 12 priests of the Shinshi, 6 level 100 NPCs. My lord, the demon has fallen. Awaiting your judgment. My lord, we've prevented the demon's teleportation. Awaiting your judgment. My lord, the demon's movements are sealed. Awaiting your judgment. Reports came in one after another. Monkey Spanner, the original priest stationed in the sky, sent his booming message, followed by the other priests' calm voices, each one reporting perfect results. And of course, that was natural. Even this, insurance, force alone, 6 out of 12 of the Shinshi's top priests, was enough to wipe out a small guild. Each carried at least legendary class equipment, whether inherited from their original masters or supplied directly by Tiamat. And all of that power had gathered for a single target. No matter if that enemy was level 100 as well, escape was impossible. Without a world item level artifact, one with absurd, game-breaking effects, there would be no survival. And even then, with Tiamat himself present, escape was unthinkable. Still, Tiamat wasn't careless. Even if the foe was only an NPC, they didn't yet know its full identity. Perhaps, however unlikely, this NPC might be carrying a world item. That was why Tiamat had held off on striking first, some world items only triggered when the holder was attacked. But judging by the results, the enemy clearly wasn't that fortunate. Then it's about time I end this. It has to be my hand that finishes it. Understood. But please be cautious, Master. You must not be harmed. It's a guild battle, Aya. Danger comes with the job. He chuckled. Danger was nothing new. Ever since he'd joined the 12 guilds and become one of their leaders, his risk had dropped, but in Yggdrasil, danger was constant. Enemy hunts, boss raids, guild wars, the essence of the game had always been risk. And though this world now felt more real than ever, Tiamat carried the same confidence he'd had back then. World items don't work on their owners. As long as I'm equipped with mine, even Longinus can't kill me. Longinus, the mightiest of all world items, first among the 20 supreme artifacts of legend. Yet even that couldn't harm a player who possessed a world item of their own. World items could only be countered by other world items, not by nullifying them, but because their effects simply excluded other holders. Besides, they've only just arrived here. They probably don't even understand what items exist outside of Yggdrasil. In other words, no real threat, Aya. Still, please don't lower your guard. I won't. Now, let's go finish this. Where are you going? Tiamat lifted into the air. Dean called after him, but he didn't answer. He rose through the hole the demon had torn in the roof, surveyed the surroundings, then turned toward the rising dust in the distance. There lay Demiurge, half buried in the ground, his form grotesque and unrecognizable. The suit that had fit his humanoid disguise was shredded, his true body swollen and monstrous. His face, once a stern man's, had twisted into a hideous blend of frog, toad, and shark-like fangs. This was the real face of a demon. Their human form was only a mask, one likely chosen to suit their master's preferences. Tiamat walked slowly toward the crumpled, frog-shaped demon. And just as he approached, the creature's bulging eyes snapped open. Cup of Phijaya close hollow corner bracket. A crimson flash burst outward. Centered on the demon, a shockwave spread in a ring, everything it touched withering to dust. Trees, grass, small animals underground, even the birds in the sky. The Cup of Phijaya. The supreme item bestowed upon Demiurge by his one true master. A trump card he would never draw except at the brink of death, but this time, he had no choice. If he could just seize this enemy commander, he could turn the battle around. The red light surged past Tiamat, and did nothing. The grass beneath his feet was charred, the trees behind him dead and dry, but Tiamat himself stood unharmed, merely raising an eyebrow. Demiurge's monstrous face twisted further. Tiamat smiled faintly. Ho! Demiurge swallowed a growl. So it's true, he thought. The enemy possessed a world item as well. His trump card was worthless. Even with half his HP recovered from the item's vampiric effect, he saw no way to win. And before him stood this impossible opponent, not just the leader, but surrounded by other terrifying powers, Monkey Spanner in the sky, those who had blocked his teleportation and sealed the airspace. All aligned, all closing in. It was the same scene that had once unfolded in reverse, when Ains Ulgaun hunted Monkey Spanner. Now that same inevitability had turned upon Demiurge himself. Was this karma? He gave a hollow laugh inside. Before Tiamat's cold gaze, the demon had already drawn something out. A small, chalice-shaped artifact no larger than his head, glimmering faintly with a sickly light. Tiamat tilted his head, recognizing it instantly, then chuckled. So that's what you've got, makes sense now. He knew that shape well. Every hardcore Yggdrasil veteran would. He'd memorized the entire list of 200 world items long ago. The Cup of Phijaya. Ains Ulgaun Momanga, huh? So you've even given a world item to your NPCs. You must be drowning in them. Well, I suppose that makes sense. No other guild had double-digit world items by the end. You know of me. Demiurge rasped. May I ask which guild you belong to? You've got no right to know that. And more importantly. Tiamat's eyes narrowed to slits. You're the one who killed Monkey Spanner, aren't you? Demiurge's bulging crimson eyes went wide. That name, spoken aloud. And worse, the way Tiamat had said, Momanga, earlier. He'd called the Supreme One so casually, not as, Ainsama, but simply Momanga. The implication chilled him to the bone. To know the name of the Supreme Being, to speak it like an equal. Even as an enemy, Demiurge couldn't show disrespect. He straightened, voice trembling with reverence. May I ask who you truly are? Didn't I just say you don't have the right to know? That curt reply bit deep, and the demon gritted his teeth. Of course. A being of equal standing to his lord wouldn't indulge such questions. And worse, the situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. This wasn't just any survivor of Yggdrasil. This was a guild-class entity, a power that knew Ains Ulgaun personally, that called the Supreme One, Momanga. He had attacked that being's subordinates, pillaged their holdings, and provoked them without realizing who they were. This was no simple skirmish, it was a declaration of war. And the more he thought about it, the clearer his dread became. If these people were once close to Ainsama, they knew Nazarick. They understood its defenses, its tactics, its members. And if they were now enemies, they were the most dangerous kind. He could already hear the words of one of the 41 supreme beings, Punito Moasama. Information is everything. To know your enemy first is to win half the war. That meant, Nazarick had already lost half the war. Demiurge's mind raced. He needed to end this somehow. Stall for time, de-escalate, something. I believe there's been some misunderstanding between us. Save it. But still. Just answer one thing. You did kill Monkey Spanner, didn't you? There was no escaping it now. Demiurge squeezed his massive, frog-like eyes shut. Quote. Yes. It was by my hand alone. I see. Then please, grant me the mercy of ending it here. Take my items, take everything, but my master would not wish needless conflict between us. I beg you, spare him that. His tone was desperate yet sincere. He would give his life to protect Ainsama and prevent this war. But Tiamat's answer was merciless. That's not for you to decide. The words were cold enough to freeze the air. And besides, I don't intend to let you die so easily. You said it yourself, didn't you? You don't even know what happens when one of you truly dies here. The implication hit him harder than any blow. Demiurge bowed his head, eyes closing in grim resignation. Then, please, at least take this wretched life of mine. And vent your anger upon it. He knelt, presenting his neck. Fighting would only worsen the Supreme One's position. If his death could calm this being's wrath, then that was a price worth paying. And perhaps, in death, he could still protect Nazarick. I see. Tiamat murmured quietly. In Yggdrasil, killing was never the end. Whether player or NPC, death was just another form of failure, temporary, correctable, and followed by revival. That was the logic of every MMORPG. Death wasn't final, only a step in progression. He frowned slightly. Strategically speaking, the smart move would be to capture you, seal you, or cast a mind control spell. That's what the GBR Guild Battle Rules would recommend, after all. His tone cooled. But demons have high resistance to mind and holy effects, and besides, you killed one of my subordinates. That was reason enough. Demiurge understood instantly, and strangely, even found relief in the realization. Because yes, what Tiamat said was true. Compared to what Ainsama and the Guardians had planned for Monkey Spanner, this was mercy. If he were captured, sealed, or dominated, revival might never come. But if he died here, Ainsama could resurrect him. He remembered Shaltir's case. Yes, her memories had been damaged upon revival, but not erased completely. If he was lucky, if even a fragment of this truth survived in his soul, he could pass on the knowledge that their enemy, this, Dragon's Dream, family, was no mere house of nobles, but a front. A facade carefully crafted to lure others like them, players from Yggdrasil. Tiamat's hand rose slowly. In its wake, a colossal spectral dragon claw manifested behind him, scales glittering, talons like blades, glowing faintly gold. Its shadow alone swallowed Demiurge whole. Open hollow corner bracket dragon claw close hollow corner bracket. As Tiamat focused his power, the claw grew sharper, denser, until it was almost solid light. Then he closed his hand. K-Kerr. Crunch. The sound was wet and hideous. Demiurge's body bent unnaturally, flesh burst, bones snapped. His HP gauge plummeted in an instant. The agony was unbearable, but he didn't resist. He accepted it, because dying quietly was his only remaining duty. Only then could he ensure the chance for Ainsama to know the truth. Even as his vision blurred, his mind burned with clarity. Fragments of data and intuition aligned like stars. The Dragon's Dream family that had suddenly appeared 150 years ago. The succession of heads that each wielded godlike power. Their disinterest in politics but omnipresence in crises, guiding the continent from the shadows. Their influence spread across every nation. And suddenly, it all made sense. Wait. A thought like lightning struck him. This entire family was bait. The words echoed in his collapsing mind. A lure. A beautifully constructed decoy. A false legend seeded across history to attract outsiders like him, to draw Yggdrasil-born beings out from hiding. No, this can't be. His mind trembled. He had missed it all, every hint, every sign. Their plans, their history, it had all been designed centuries ago, and he'd walked straight into it. They had been manipulating the board from the very beginning. Even this confrontation had been anticipated. This was planned, 150 years ago. Demiurge's last thought sharpened with iron will. This truth must reach Ainsama, at all costs. He didn't care if he perished. He had to ensure Nazarick understood what kind of opponent they faced, one vast enough to rival, perhaps even surpass, the Great Tomb itself. That determination was the last flicker of his soul. And then, crack! The dragon claw crushed his skull like a ripe fruit. Blue ichor spilled between the shimmering scales. Dripping from the fist of divine power that held him. Thus ended the life of Demiurge, begging for mercy, yet clinging to duty. Killed not by hatred, but by the will of something far older and far more calculating. And somewhere in the silent void before oblivion, he prayed one final time. Ainsama, please, know the truth. Yet the wise demon failed to grasp one simple truth. That it wasn't over. Dead, is he? No, master. Vital activity has ceased, but his HP hasn't yet reached zero. I'd say he's nearly dead, or in the process of dying. I see, no resurrection item, then. Or perhaps he simply chose not to use one, well, he was trying to die, after all. Tiamat murmured before the glowing claw of Dragon Claw, its spectral grip still tightening around the corpse. The entire area was locked behind layers of barriers. Teleportation blocked, spatial magic sealed. Only a few world-class items like Shukuchi Shinton or Sleipnir could have breached such a prison. In Yggdrasil, where leveling was easy but capture was ruinous, players often used every form of binding, sealing, and curse magic imaginable to restrain opponents. Death, however, remained the one escape that no spell could prevent. Dropping an item upon death was frustrating. But being captured alive was the true nightmare. During guild wars, many even imprisoned defeated players indefinitely rather than kill them, since forced logouts merely returned them to their last save point. Here, though, this was no game. There were no system warnings or moderation guidelines, no GBR limits to obey. And so, Tiamat had killed Demiurge. The demon had accepted death willingly, believing it to be his release, his final escape. But Tiamat had no intention of letting him escape. I wouldn't know what it means to die and come back in this world, but even Monkey Spanner lost part of his memory. There's no reason the same rule has to apply to you. Whether the dying demon heard him or not was unclear, but Tiamat's expression hardened. More importantly, I won't let the thing that killed my property run away through death. That's far too merciful. Then, at last, Demiurge's HP ticked to zero. From beneath the crushed dragon claw spilled several items, clattering to the ground. Among them was the bizarre chalice, the cup of Phijaya. Tiamat stooped, picked it up, and rolled up his sleeve. Beneath the robe and armor, his bare forearm revealed an inky black serpent tattoo, each scale etched with uncanny realism, glimmering faintly as though alive. It wasn't a mere design. It was a bound item, one of the few Yggdrasil artifacts that permanently fused with its wielder, never vanishing even upon death unless its power was wholly spent. Are you going to use it, Master? Of course. It's too valuable to waste, but there's no point hoarding an unused weapon. Items existed to be used. Even consumables with limited charges were meant to fulfill their purpose. And though this particular artifact could never be replaced, not even within Yggdrasil, Tiamat made his decision. For this item was one of the few capable of influencing the very world itself. Devour it. Open hollow corner bracket Quetzalcoatl, the soul-eating serpent close hollow corner bracket. The black serpent on his arm moved. It slithered, coiling across his skin, its scales flashing with a crimson gleam. Then, opening a vast, fanged maw, it lunged toward the corpse of Demiurge, ready to consume not his flesh, but his soul. 88 Returning once more, 6. Chapter 88. Returning once more, 6. In great guilds of Yggdrasil, it was expected that each possessed at least one world item, those legendary, balance-breaking relics that warped the very rules of the game. Even if few could rival the infamous Ains ul Gaun, who hoarded more than a dozen of them by the game's end, many powerful guilds still held 3 or 4. After all, with over 200 in existence, it wasn't impossible, though some were consumables, lost forever once used. And among these 200, there existed a class apart, the 20, the true world-class items. Their effects transcended gameplay, reaching into the system itself, items so broken that even the developers labeled them cheats or bugs. One could alter map data, Ouroboros. Another could rewrite combat logic, fivefold cycle of elements. And others tampered directly with user data. Among them, the most feared was Longinus. An item that, upon use, instantly killed both the target and the wielder, erasing all data, even from the server backups. Log out, hide, flee, nothing could save a marked player. It had never been used, yet the mere rumor of its existence made top-ranked players tremble. Then there was Ahura Mazda, which inverted karma values, turning the purest saints into devils, or permanently corrupting evil users' data. To those who bore negative alignment, being struck by it was a death sentence of reputation and build alike. But few items rivaled the one that Tiamat now wielded. Quetzalcoatl, the soul-eating serpent. One of the 20, and one of only 5 world-class relics known to exist in Shinshi today. When used, the serpent branded itself as a black tattoo upon the player's body, a permanent fusion. Its effect, to seal the data, the very soul, of the one it had personally slain. Unlike Longinus, it did not annihilate instantly. It imprisoned. Respawn lock. Once the serpent consumed a dead target's data, that being could never respawn, Not unless another 20 undid the seal, or the wielder chose to release it. And the true horror. The item was reusable. Bound permanently to the user. Yes, but after a long cooldown, it could devour another soul again. A limited use consumable, but one whose every use rewrote destiny itself. To slay a major NPC or world enemy with it was to destroy an entire questline forever. To use it on a guild leader was to cripple a faction for eternity. It was for this reason the 20 were feared. And why even Longinus wasn't necessarily the worst of them. And now, Tiamat had unleashed Quetzalcoatl upon Demiurge. Under normal circumstances, Demiurge's own world item, the Cup of Phijaya, would have protected him. If he were a player, he might have resisted even death itself. But he wasn't. He was an NPC, and in dying, he had dropped everything. From the collapsing polygon of his dissolving corpse. A scream tore through the air, a shriek that was neither sound nor flesh, but soul. It was as though hell itself had been torn open. The black serpent on Tiamat's arm uncoiled and struck, its fanged maw expanding impossibly wide. And in one long, drawn-out pull, it swallowed the demon's scream whole, dragging Demiurge's very essence into its abyssal throat. When the sound faded, only silence remained. And the serpent's tattoo glowed faintly crimson. Its hunger momentarily sated. It's over, Tiamat murmured. Yes, master. It's over, and also, perhaps, just beginning. You're right. He exhaled deeply, feeling the lingering resonance of the world item fade from the air. One demon slain. But he knew better than to think this was the end. The data, the very soul, of the guild NPC Demiurge had been devoured completely by the soul-eating serpent. Even for a level 100 NPC with demonic heritage and absurd mental resistance, there was no surviving the pull of a world item. The tattooed serpent belched softly, as if satisfied, before stilling once again beneath Tiamat's sleeve. It was done. And yet, this victory only confirmed his worst suspicion. I thought it might be, and of course, it's Ainz Ul Gaun. He rubbed his temples in irritation. This was bad, very bad. Among the countless guilds of Yggdrasil, Ainz Ul Gaun stood alone in infamy. An evil-aligned collective, infamous even among DQN delinquent guilds, made up solely of heteromorphic races, demons, undead, aberrations, things that should not exist. Though they numbered only 41, every single member was on par with the executive officers of major guilds. Two of them were World Festival champions, the elite global PvP event that crowned the strongest players across every class and archetype. Even the data logs and NPC scripts of Yggdrasil whispered their name in awe. Ainz Ul Gaun had once annihilated an alliance of 1,500 players, a feat now immortalized in legend. They'd lured that army into their guild home, the Great Tomb of Nazareth, and obliterated them despite being outnumbered 25-1. Trap or no trap, strategy or not, the fact that 41 players could pull that off was absurd. And now, that same guild had resurfaced in this world. Tiamat's mind spun. If it had been Villain Union or Dark Soul, it might have been worse in raw numbers. Those were massive PK guilds from Muspelheim, the brutal PvP server where daily murder was practically a login bonus. Those lunatics killed for pleasure and philosophy alike. I can't sleep until I PK someone. This is how I express love. Let me baptize you in fire and blood. Deranged killers masquerading as players. Even the 12 divines had once suffered heavy losses to them. If those maniacs had crossed over into this world, civilization itself might not survive. Still, Ainz Ul Gaun was hardly a comfort. They weren't as chaotic, but they were colder, more methodical. They didn't burn worlds out of passion. They dissected them. And worst of all, they planned. They don't act out of madness, Tiamat muttered. They act out of purpose. Their philosophy of domination, their fixation on order through fear, and their overwhelming arsenal of world items made them a danger unlike any other. At least it wasn't Villain Union or Dark Soul, he sighed. But Ainz Ul Gaun might actually be worse. Because they wouldn't rampage blindly. They would build a kingdom, a hierarchy, a network. And in doing so, they would twist the world itself to their vision. If their guild base came through like ours did, that'll be a problem. Tiamat's muttering carried the weight of realization. The Great Tomb of Nazareth, guild base of Ainz Ul Gaun, was one of Yggdrasil's ultimate fortresses, infamous for having buried 1,500 attackers in a single raid. To enter was to surrender. Survival inside was a matter of how long you could stall before dying. Even if their guild only numbered 41, Nazarik's internal defense system was an impregnable labyrinth of traps, guardians, and layered floors that even top-tier raiding guilds couldn't crack. If that entire structure had crossed into this world as Shinshi's 12 priests had, then this wasn't just a guild war, it was the beginning of an era of annihilation. And among all guilds, Ains Ulgaon was the only one to possess double-digit world items at the game's end. Now, one of those, the Cup of Phaijaya, rested in Tiamat's hand, freshly taken from Demiurge's corpse. What now? It'll work out somehow, won't it, Master? Yeah, it'll have to. Too late to back down now. Monkey Spanner was dead. Demiurge had been executed in retaliation. There was no going back. Between the Zodiac and Ains Ulgaon, a river of blood now divided them. He knew the logic of guild wars better than anyone. In Yggdrasil, bending the knee first was suicide. To seek compromise after a killing was to invite predation, a declaration of weakness. If you bow, they'll devour you. That's the law of guild war. He hadn't killed Demiurge in rage, he'd done it because he had to. This was no longer a matter of pride, but of survival. The crucial advantage was information. Ains Ulgaon didn't yet know who their enemy truly was. They didn't know that the adversary who had slain their demon was the leader of the Zodiac, nor that the Shinshi Guild base had manifested in this world. Tiamat intended to exploit that ignorance mercilessly. Let them underestimate him. Let them think he was just another wandering anomaly. They don't know they're fighting the Zodiac yet. Let's use that. But before war, there were preparations. 2 centuries had passed since Shinshi last gathered in full force. If war was coming, they would need to reconvene, rearm, and ready their divine NPCs. It's done here. I'm returning to Shinshi, Aya. Once I arrive, gather the priests. We're holding a council. Understood, Master. Shall I also prepare to contact the others? Ah, right, them too. He thought briefly of Dean and the others, of the remnants still scattered after Monkey Spanner's fall. Monkey Spanner managed them, right. Tell them to clean up the remains and report back. Yes, Master. We'll await you in Shinshi. You're always watching anyway. A tired sigh escaped him, but his eyes were sharp, focused past the kingdom of Re-Estais, toward the distant, unseen lair of his new enemy. Once, he and Momonga had spoken casually, comrades linked by the loneliness of dying worlds. He'd even admired the undead ruler once. But those days were over. You'd better be ready, Momonga. He, Tiamat, stood alone. Ains Ulgaon's numbers were unknown. Their strength, unimaginable. But retreat was not an option. If the price of blood had been named, then he would pay it back 100-fold. This isn't the end, he murmured as he raised his hand. It's the beginning of a proper guild war. With a single motion, the air shimmered, and the gate of transference opened before him, its light swallowing him whole as he returned to Shinshi, where the Council of the 12 awaited. 89. Facing Within the Distortion 1. Chapter 89. Facing Within the Distortion 1. At that same moment, in a quiet room of an Erantel inn, the dark hero removed his helmet, revealing the face beneath. But the face exposed was not of a rugged adventurer, no flesh, no muscle, no skin. Only a pure white skull, sinisterly warped, with sharp, demonic contours. The bone structure was far thicker and larger than a normal human's, the eye sockets twisted into an almost predatory glare, the jawbone reinforced like a weapon. If an ordinary skull was human, this was the face of a demon. And deep within its hollow sockets, 2 crimson lights burned, cold, intelligent, and wickedly alive. A terrifying figure by all standards. Yet instead of roaring curses or invoking some unholy spell, the skeletal being simply reached into a leather pouch and let out a tired sigh. Another exhausting day. His name had once been Momonga. But that name was long gone. Now, he was known only as Ains Ulgaon, the supreme ruler of the great tomb of Nazarik, the one and only Overlord. Though his undead body could not tire, he still felt the weight of mental exhaustion. True fatigue, emotional weariness, was something even undeath could not erase. Still, moments like this, make me wish I could sleep. He let out another hollow sigh. Since the day he and his guild had been transported to this new world, Ains had retained his racial evolution from skeleton mage to overlord. But along with that came a curse, the loss of every human function. He could no longer eat, drink, or sleep. When he looked in a mirror, there was no man, only polished bone. When he ran his hand across his body, it was nothing but rigid armor and cold hardness. Even his eyes were not eyes at all, just flames flickering inside empty sockets. To think how precious sleep really was. It was ironic, something humans took for granted had become a luxury even eternity couldn't offer him. A moment to forget, to rest the heart, that was true bliss. Still, at least I saved time. Ains had worked tirelessly that day, slaying monsters, collecting rare herbs, rescuing villagers, defending towns. Every mission completed raised the reputation of Momin the Dark Hero. And this wasn't a one-day effort. For several days straight, he had continued without rest, using his tireless undead body to complete requests others would never dare to accept. While Adamantiter-ranked adventurers were rare and often idle between commissions, Ains deliberately chose lower-ranked quests, dangerous, neglected, or outright suicidal tasks. He didn't interfere with work already claimed by others, but the pool of available missions was still vast. After all, in this fragile world, death was permanent. Adventurers had only one life to lose, and few dared to gamble it. Thus, Ains thrived where others hesitated. Of course, there was more to it than mere personal drive. This was all part of Demiurge's grand plan. Right, Demiurge said I need to build fame as quickly as possible. According to Demiurge, Ains had to amass overwhelming renown, not just enough to be known, but enough to eclipse even the legendary families of this continent. Simply joining Dragon's Dream would not suffice. Even though Demiurge had already infiltrated and seized control of that ancient noble house. Its prestige, built over 150 years, could not be replaced overnight. Thus, Ains would rise publicly as the heroic adventurer Momin, while Demiurge consolidated control from within. Eventually, Ains would be crowned both hero and ruler, and at last, he would place the name Ains Ulgaun above Dragon's Dream itself. For that, he needed fame, real, unshakable fame. Being Adamantiter-ranked wasn't enough. Even defeating the demon, Yaldabaoth wouldn't be enough. He needed something greater. Demiurge's plan was simple yet theatrical, to let Yaldabaoth grow into a world-shaking calamity. A fiend so powerful that nations themselves would tremble, and then have Momin, the hero, destroy him before all the world. Demiurge called it a dramatic arc, right? Ains agreed. To move hearts, one needed drama. One needed spectacle. Just as the noble houses built their reputations over centuries, Yaldabaoth would rise as the symbol of terror, and Momin, his conqueror, as the symbol of hope. Soon, the demon's shadow would fall over the empire, then the Holy Kingdom. Ains still remembered the day Demiurge explained it, his eloquence so brilliant that even Ains could only nod in awe. To turn a simple villain into a myth, to turn the guild's name into legend, it was genius. Of course, they didn't have a century to spare. 5 years at most, Demiurge said. 5 years to let the world believe in fear, and then deliver salvation at the hands of Ains Ulgaun. And so, to meet those expectations, Ains worked relentlessly. The first step, building renown, was already underway. He would make Momin's name shine brighter than any other. The name of Ains Ulgaun would follow. And in time, the world itself would kneel before both. But Ains had only one body, and could only accept one request at a time. And to make it look believable that he was actually completing these requests, he couldn't appear to finish them too quickly, either. After several days of the same routine, Ains began to feel bored. Still, nothing to be done about it, sigh. He let out another long, hollow sigh. Raising the name of Ains Ulgaun into legend, that was his own command, the very order he had given Demiurge. And Demiurge, in his brilliance, had crafted a flawless plan to make it happen. But even perfection could be exhausting. At some point, Ains realized that he was merely going along with Demiurge's grand design, playing the part expected of him, and it wasn't exactly what he'd imagined. It was grind work, plain and simple. Even in another world, he was still stuck in endless grind quests. The crimson light in his sockets dimmed. So let's keep it up, I've done worse. He tried to encourage himself. And in truth, he was used to this. Back in Yggdrasil, it wasn't all exciting raids and epic adventures. He'd spent hours upon hours grinding for levels, completing tedious fetch quests, or mining rare materials. He'd swung a pickaxe in a virtual mine for 12 straight hours. He'd fished in a river for rare loot until dawn. He'd ridden summons for hours just traveling between zones, staring blankly at scrolling landscapes. He'd even sat waiting for boss respawn so long that the party ran out of things to talk about and just stared into the digital void. So really, this sort of work was nothing new to Ains. Reality can't beat MMO grind. I've done this hundreds of times before. Not something to be proud of, but it did mean he was used to repetition. Still, now that this world was real, his mind and body seemed to accumulate a strange kind of fatigue. Not physical, of course, undead couldn't feel that. But a quiet, creeping mental weariness that had no outlet. He couldn't even rest to make it go away. Undead couldn't tire, yet somehow, Ains felt a strange kind of sorrow. He couldn't frown. He couldn't cry. Only the faint red glow of his eyes flickered dimly. Ha! Let's hang in there. Today's grind. Tomorrow's grind. All of it, for Ains Ulgaun. With renewed determination, he reached to put his helmet back on. Ains Sama. What? Suddenly, a message spell activated, a sharp, urgent voice struck through his consciousness. It was Albedo. But why now? Startled, Ains nearly fell out of his chair, but managed to keep his composure thanks to emotional suppression. Though his mind had flinched in shock, the undead calm quickly returned, and he cleared his throat, adopting his usual commanding tone. What is it, Albedo? I am currently in the middle of a request. Forgive me for interrupting, Ains-sama. But something terrible has happened. You must return to the throne hall immediately. Her tone was frantic, something Ains had never heard from her before. Even during Shultir's incident, she had remained calm and measured. This time, panic laced every word. What's going on? Explain yourself, calmly. There was a pause. A trembling breath. And then, Albedo's voice broke. Demiurge has been killed, Ains-sama. What? Ains's composure shattered. All dignity, all calm, even his undead emotional suppression, gone. His voice burst out in pure disbelief and rage. The Overlord who could face armies without flinching was now frozen in shock. The crimson glow in his eyes flared violently. Every thought of fame, quests, or plans vanished. In that moment, one word echoed through the hollow skull of the Sorcerer King. Demiurge. And the word that followed it. Dead. 90. Facing within the distortion 2. Chapter 90. Facing within the distortion 2. Without hesitation, Ains gathered all the guardians back to Nazarick. He couldn't teleport directly into the throne room, so he activated his teleportation magic and arrived in the chamber directly before it, Lemegeddon. There, he pushed open the grand, heavy doors and strode toward the throne of crystal that gleamed at the center. Inside, all the guardians had already assembled. There was no table, no decorations, only a single crystal throne in the great royal hall. Once, 41 chairs had stood here, but now only that one remained. Passing by the kneeling guardians, Albedo, Cocytus, Mare, Aura, and Sebastian, Ains quietly sat upon the throne. Yet among the gathered guardians, 2 seats were empty. One belonged to Victim, who was never summoned outside his defensive floor. The other was absent for a far more dire reason. As Ains's skeletal steps echoed across the hall, his bony face betrayed no emotion, but every guardian present could sense it. Their master was displeased. Deeply. And beneath that cold aura lurked an anger so intense it made their bodies tremble. Seated upon the throne, Ains looked down at them. 6 guardians kneeling, 1 seat empty. The missing one. Nazarick's greatest intellect. The wisest of demons, the strategist who never failed to devise an answer, Demiurge. His place was vacant. Quote. Master source, open. Ains spoke softly. The words weren't directed to anyone in the room. Yet a semi-transparent console appeared before him, floating in the air. It wasn't quite like the old Yggdrasil console, similar in appearance, but different in function. Countless glowing tags and lines of text filled the screen. This was Nazarick's internal management system. He had used it once before, back when he resurrected Shultir. Within it were lists of the tomb's daily upkeep costs, the number and types of servants and constructs currently active, and other data that allowed for remote maintenance, but only here, in the throne hall, could the system be accessed in this world. Back in Yggdrasil, it had been usable anywhere on the server. Now, Ains's experiments had proven that it only functioned from Nazarick's heart. The crimson flames in Ains's sockets swept across the floating panel. With a few gestures, he opened the NPC tag list. The record of every NPC the guild had created together. He sorted them by level. Names lined up in pristine white script, scrolling downward. And there, where Demiurge's name should have been, was a blank space. Or rather, it wasn't blank, the text was there. But so faint that it had nearly disappeared. Ains's teeth clicked together sharply. In this system, when an NPC or character dies, their name vanishes, leaving only empty space. When resurrected, the name reappears. It was all the confirmation he needed. For a moment, rage flooded his mind, a red haze of fury washing over all thought. Then, with a faint metallic chime, emotional suppression triggered. His consciousness cleared, only for anger to surge up again. Again, suppression activated. Again, it fell silent. It repeated several times, until finally, Ains realized his fury could rise no higher. He exhaled slowly. Ha, I see. So that's how it is. It was confirmed. Demiurge was dead. Dead beyond all doubt. Ains's jaw tightened until his teeth ground together audibly. This was nothing like the incident with Shaltir. Then, he had been confused, caught off guard. And Shaltir's survival had allowed him to act rationally. But this time, there was no ambiguity. Demiurge had been attacked and killed. The enemy might still be unknown, but this was an undeniable act of aggression, a declaration of war against Nazarick itself. Fury boiled within him like molten fire. Yet Ains knew rage alone would solve nothing. He steadied himself and looked down upon the kneeling guardians. First of all, I ask you all, does anyone know anything about the circumstances of Demiurge's death? The hall fell into heavy silence. Then, at last, a deep, halting voice broke it. Cocytus spoke first, his tone measured and slow. Forgive me, Ains-sama, said Cocytus first, his deep voice halting as usual. I was stationed in the throne hall and have not had contact with Demiurge since receiving his report yesterday. Two as well, have none, Mare added nervously. I was, in the Lizardman village, so. Ains-sama. My brother and I were building an outpost in the forest. Aura quickly followed. Yes, I was with my sister too, Ains-sama, Mare murmured again. As for me, said Sebas with calm formality, I was in the royal capital carrying out the cleanup operation and other assigned duties. Like Albedo, I last spoke with him only yesterday, during our regular report. I see. Ains nodded slowly. He, too, had received a report from Demiurge just the previous day. None of the Guardians had any reason to lie. It was now certain that no one knew anything about the circumstances of Demiurge's death. To be honest, Ains had been tense all the way here. Demiurge was dead. Demiurge. Of all beings in Nazarick, the wisest devil, the overseer of all royal capital operations, the brilliant strategist who shaped Nazarick's direction, gone. The realization filled Ains with a greater sense of danger than even Shaltir's incident had. True, Demiurge had been acting outside Nazarick, and death was always possible. But that Demiurge, the cunning, careful demon who was always 10 steps ahead. The shock was unavoidable. Now, seeing that the other guardians were unharmed, Ains felt a small measure of relief. If multiple guardians had perished, he wasn't sure even he could have contained his fury. Still, anger remained. There was no information, not even the faintest clue. Who was the enemy? Just like with Shaltir, they knew nothing again. Twice now, Nazarick had been attacked, and both times, they hadn't even glimpsed the enemy's shadow. It was infuriating. Then, for now, they would find out soon enough. Ains manipulated the master source once more. At once, golden light flooded the room. The faint clinking sound of coins echoed as rivers of gold poured down, filling every corner of the throne hall except for the crystal throne and the kneeling guardians. It was gold coins, not of this world, but from Yggdrasil. Ains had just withdrawn 500 million gold coins, roughly 10,000 tons, from the guild treasury through the system interface. Just as he had during Shaltir's resurrection, he had opened the guild vault to prepare for Demiurge's revival. Of course, the process didn't require doing this manually, but it felt right to follow the same ritual. More than that, seeing it with his own eyes made the act feel meaningful. This would deplete Nazarick's treasury even further, but Ains didn't care. Just as he hadn't cared for the cost of resurrecting Shaltir, the life of a guardian was worth infinitely more than any sum of gold. Demiurge wasn't just any NPC, he had been created by one of the supreme beings, Albert Alon Odal, and had since become one of Ains's most loyal subordinates, Nazarick's strategist, its mind. He could not be left dead. Ains-sama, you intend to resurrect Demiurge? Asked Albedo softly. Yes. Let us bring him back first, and then we'll discuss what happened. As you command, Ains-sama. All the guardians bowed deeply. Ains focused his gaze on the faint blank space where Demiurge's name should have been and pressed it. Once. Twice. Again. And again. And again. Nothing happened. The name remained pale and empty. The console did not respond. Ains's bony fingers stopped midair. The red light in his skull flickered, confusion, disbelief. Wah, what? A sound escaped his jaw, halfway between a gasp and a groan, the voice of a king who had just realized the unthinkable. Demiurge could not be resurrected. 91. Facing within the distortion 3. Chapter 91. Facing within the distortion 3. After experiencing mental suppression over a dozen times, Ains finally managed to regain his composure. How? His thoughts were in chaos. Confusion, anger, fear, disbelief, every emotion swirled violently, only to be crushed over and over again by the automatic effect of emotional suppression. Each wave of forced calm only left his mind more fragmented. Still, suppression continued to trigger, again and again, until at last, Ains's awareness cleared enough to think rationally. The translucent system console still floated before him, unresponsive to every touch. When Shultir had been resurrected, the moment he pressed her name, a cascade of golden light had flowed like molten metal. The coins would merge into a radiant form, taking shape as the NPC's body, then life, or something akin to it, would return. That was what should have happened. But this time, nothing. No light. No response. Demiurge's name remained pale and hollow. No matter how many times he pressed it, once, twice, 10 times, there was only silence. Now too exhausted even to feel emotion, Ains just kept pressing, click, 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 like a broken automaton. Finally, Albedo, who had been watching anxiously, spoke hesitantly. Ains-sama. Ains-sama. Are you not attempting to resurrect Demiurge? Ains-sama. It's done. Ains stopped pressing the console. His voice, hollow and brittle, sounded as if it belonged to a man who had aged decades in an instant. The resurrection won't work. What? He cannot be revived, Albedo. The thought can't be. Albedo's words froze in her throat. Shultir, Cocytus, Aura, Mare, Sebas, every guardian stared in disbelief. Resurrection failed. Impossible. They had seen Shultir revived before their eyes. And their supreme ruler, the one and only Ains Ul Gaun, their god and guildmaster, he could not possibly fail to resurrect one of his own creations. Yet the truth was before them. Demiurge's name remained faded and lifeless. Ains covered his skull-like face with one bony hand, the crimson glow in his sockets flickered faintly. Again, is it? His mind drifted back to that earlier nightmare, the Shultir incident. Back then, he couldn't believe it either. A 100-level guardian, a supreme creation with near immunity to mental interference, being charmed. Controlled. It had seemed impossible. Unthinkable. And yet, it had happened. In this world, impossible was a lie. Now, once again, something beyond understanding had occurred. Even death and resurrection, the fundamental laws of the Yggdrasil system, had been defied. It can only be one of those. There were only a handful of things capable of interfering with an NPC's resurrection. He knew them well. Some powerful relics or cash shop items could delay a player's respawn, like the Ghost Soul, which forced victims into a spirit state, preventing login for several days. But those worked only on players, never on NPCs. NPCs weren't affected by respawn restrictions or debuffs tied to player systems, except by one terrifying exception. World items. The supreme relics that transcended all logic. Over 200 artifacts of godlike power, each capable of bending or breaking the system itself. If anything could block resurrection, even that of a guild NPC, it would be one of these. Among them, Ains could recall fewer than 10 that directly influenced resurrection. The most infamous were the Longinus, capable of permanently erasing both data and soul, and the soul-eating serpent, nearly as dreadful but reusable. Others included Soul Caliber, which forcibly extended a target's resurrection cooldown to a full day, and Death's Scythe, which doubled the penalty upon revival. The last two, however, were temporary. Demiurge should have revived by the next day if one of those had been used. But the others, those two Longinus and Soul-Eating Serpent, even recalling their names filled Ains with dread. They were the tools of top-tier guilds, the elite of the elite. If one of those guilds had crossed over into this world, then Nazarick might have met its true equal. This is bad, Ains thought grimly. Even for the dreaded Ains Ul Gaun, with all its dark legend and 41 supreme beings, they were still a small guild compared to the massive organizations that possessed such relics, guilds with thousands of members. And one of them, now held Demiurge's soul hostage. Even though most of those great guilds had dwindled by the end of Yggdrasil, With many of their players quitting the game and their numbers shrinking, they remained terrifying foes nonetheless. However, Longinus was a single-use weapon, the ultimate item that annihilated both the target's data and the user's own in the process. Once activated, it would even erase NPCs entirely, deleting every bit of data assigned to them. But using such a weapon on Demiurge, it was far too excessive, even by Ains's standards. That left only one possibility. If it was the soul-eating serpent. Ains felt an icy chill crawl up his spine. No, it can't be. Ains-sama. Albedo's anxious voice rang out as Ains suddenly stood up, startling everyone. But he ignored her, the red glow in his eye sockets flared wildly, trembling with agitation. Even emotional suppression couldn't completely contain the storm raging inside him. It can't be. Everyone, stay here and wait for me. Yes, Ains-sama. We will wait for however long it takes. Good. I won't be long. With that, Ains stormed out of the throne hall and into the inner corridors. After a long walk through the solemn passageways, he activated teleportation to reach a deeper chamber, the treasure vault of the Great Tomb of Nazareth. The moment he arrived, a dazzling brilliance flooded his vision, as though the countless stars of the heavens had been gathered into a single place. The ceiling was so high it vanished into darkness, and the walls stretched far beyond sight. Everywhere, treasures glimmered in gold and crystal splendor. But Ains didn't spare them a glance. He strode forward, muttering the same word over and over through his clacking teeth. No, no, no. It couldn't be. It mustn't be. Yet, no matter how desperately he tried to deny it, the most probable answer kept clawing its way to the front of his mind. He had to confirm it. He needed to see for himself whether the enemy Ains Ulgaun now faced was that guild. And the more he thought about it, the more sense it made. From the very beginning, since the assault on the royal capital, something had felt off. The guardian-like being called Monkey Spanner had possessed equipment far too powerful for an ordinary NPC. Such gear wasn't something just anyone could craft. True, Ains Ulgaun had always been a small, elite guild of 41 members, but every one of those 41 had been an established adult with a steady income, and thus capable of heavy spending on the game. Even among them, Shaltir's equipment, painstakingly crafted by her creator, the supreme being Peroroncino, represented the peak of luxury and power. And yet, Monkey Spanner's gear had surpassed even that, if only slightly. For an NPC to be equipped at that level, their guild would have had to be enormous, one of the richest and most powerful in all of Yggdrasil. At the time, the sheer chaos of the situation and the following conquest of the Dragon's Dream clan had distracted him from considering it carefully. But now, he had to face the truth he'd overlooked. An NPC that strong could not have existed in isolation. He had assumed Monkey Spanner had simply died of old age, as Demiurge had suggested, but perhaps he should have listened more closely. If the guild that created such a being still existed, whether above the ground, in the sky, or hidden deep below the earth, if they possessed multiple Guardian-class NPCs, if they were one of those massive guilds capable of wielding world items. And if, by some impossible chance, there was still a player among them, a living master, just like Ains himself, one who ruled over their guild as he ruled over Nazareth. The thought drove Ains's mind into a spiral of dread. His imagination raced toward the worst possible scenario as he reached the deepest part of the vault, the great black wall-like door that sealed away Nazareth's true treasury. He raised his voice, reciting the incantation. Thus shalt thou claim all the glory of this world. And darkness shall flee before thee. Immediately, the dark door opened, revealing the inner sanctum, the true sanctuary of treasures, the sepulchre. But Ains had no time to admire it. He strode quickly through the corridor, reaching the central hall beyond, and there, as always, stood the NPC who imitated one of the supreme beings, Lucifer. Pandora's actor. Ooh, my glorious creator, Ains-sama. To what divine purpose do I owe this most splendid of visits today? Enough talk, Pandora's actor. Do you remember the treasures that were brought in last time? But of course, Ains-sama. Those magnificent trophies of conquest, your glorious spoils of war. I have safeguarded and catalogued them most. Spare me the details. Bring them all here, now. Under normal circumstances, Pandora's actor's theatrical speech and exaggerated posture would have struck Ains like a mental bomb, forcing him to compose himself through sheer willpower. But right now, Ains didn't have the time, nor the mental focus, to suppress his agitation. His thoughts were racing in a single, dreadful direction. Sensing the shift in his creator's tone, Pandora's actor straightened immediately, dropping the dramatics. The hollow black sockets of his mask narrowed sharply. I see, understood, Ains-sama. I shall retrieve them at once. Good. Hurry. Joel. When S- gotten will, if it be my God's will. Goo. Even so, Ains couldn't help but flinch. Pandora's actor's habit of sprinkling German still managed to deal a direct blow to his soul. The forced calm that followed let Ains briefly regain control, though only for a moment. He realized how deeply unsettled he truly was. But he had to see it for himself. If his suspicion proved true, it would mean Nazarick now stood at the edge of catastrophe. I have returned, Ains-sama. The treasures are here. Good. Hand them over. At once. Pandora's actor presented several items. A golden armor, a crown, sandals and bracelets, ceremonial robes, each one radiating faint divine power. Ains snatched them up, inspecting them feverishly. Golden chain armor. Blessed cloud crown. And then. He froze. This is. In his hand was a small ring. A plain gold band, unremarkable at first glance, save for a few delicate symbols engraved upon it. No powerful aura, no overwhelming magic. At a glance, it seemed utterly mundane. But Ains's gaze locked onto it, his crimson eye flames trembling violently. This was the item he should have noticed long ago. Its name appeared in the system interface. The Zodiac Ring. An unmistakable guild item. A counterpart to the Ring of Ains-ul Gown. A guild item, from another guild. And Ains remembered its name vividly. The Zodiac 12. The empty sockets of his skull seemed to quake. The crimson flames of his eyes flickered and thrashed madly. He now knew. The guild that had taken Demiurge. The guild that wielded the soul-eating serpent. The guild whose symbol now lay in his hand. Was none other than the 12 Divines, the legendary. 92, It finally begins, 1. Chapter 92, It finally begins, 1. Tiamat stood in darkness. This pitch-black place was the very same space where Tiamat had first opened his eyes upon arriving in this world. It was the innermost of the inner sanctums of the 12 Divines, even deeper than the chamber where he had once slept, positioned just before the treasury of the new city, Shinshi, itself. No one but players were permitted to enter this place. Not even the 12 guild NPCs could step foot here. Only the guildmasters of each division, or their highest lieutenants, had ever been granted entry. And now, Tiamat alone remained, the last surviving player and current guildmaster. Only one other being, the one who could be said to always be with him, was exempt from this rule, though even that one had never entered. He looked around. The corridor leading to the treasury was lined entirely with shelves, walls of books, paintings, sculptures, and items. Each shelf belonged to a single individual, engraved with their name, race, affiliation, level, and record date. But these weren't ordinary records. They were deeply personal, private archives, the final, intimate histories of the guild members of the 12 Divines. Opening one at random, a typical entry read. Name, Eriko. Race, Rabbit Beastman. Affiliation, Tamon. Level, 100. Date of record, Continental Era 4X. Beneath it lay a handwritten journal, personal notes written using YGGDRASIL's record system. Players could write their own histories into the game, some even used it to publish novels or adventure logs. Here, however, these journals were diaries of remembrance, personal chronicles left behind by each guild member. Tens, even hundreds of these volumes filled the hall, every one belonging to someone who had long since departed. Once, this place had been a record archive for the guild. Now, it had become something else. A mausoleum. Tiamat's gaze settled on 12 special shelves, those belonging to the original founding guildmasters of the 12 Divines. Each one was decorated with portraits, relics, personal notes, and keepsakes, memorials of those who had once led their respective divisions. It was like a row of tombstones. Each had left behind a final testament before logging out forever. Some hadn't, so Tiamat, or another remaining member, had written one in their place. Though the guild was now embroiled in crisis, and though Tiamat himself had just slain an enemy guild's NPC and sealed their resurrection with the soul-eating serpent, he still had a brief moment before the upcoming meeting. And so, he used it to revisit old memories. Before him were 12 portraits, the faces of the previous generation, the first 12 Divines close-angle bracket who had built the guild from nothing. Among them, there was one that Tiamat could never forget. King Simba. The master of the Lion King Guild, known as the Ho King, King Simba, had been the one who personally invited Tiamat into the 12 Divines. He was both friend and mentor. Tiamat's teacher. Looking up, Tiamat saw the smiling face of a beastman with the head of a tiger, wearing a tiger mask on top of his striped muzzle, a ridiculous yet endearing sight. That was King Simba. The man who had brought Tiamat into the guild, his comrade, his friend, his master. Those were good times. Back then, Tiamat had begun as a dragon race player. His enormous body and its unwieldiness made playing difficult, until he obtained the world item Tarnhelm, which allowed him to change his race at will without losing his original stats. Though he lost access to some dragon-exclusive skills and passives, his raw stats were still monstrous, far beyond those of ordinary players. Combining 3 job classes into a hidden hybrid class, Tiamat's total parameters exceeded even 3 times that of a standard max-level player. With Tarnhelm, he could wear humanoid equipment despite his draconic origins, making his base power unrivaled. But he had one flaw: his PvP skills were poor. When facing top-tier duelists, those who excelled in pure player skill, his overwhelming stats alone weren't enough. PvP required quick reflexes, spacing, and rhythm. And Tiamat's close combat control was atrocious. "Well, I couldn't help it," he murmured. "In real life, my body didn't move well. Even in virtual space, there was, always that gap. No matter how immersive the virtual world was, his real body had been disabled. That subtle disconnect between mind and movement was something he could never fully overcome. And then there was that day. You've got no talent for this, kid." King Simba had dropped by to coach him once. After just a single day of training, he left laughing, leaving those words behind. It was decisive. Tiamat realized he didn't just lack talent for PvP. He lacked talent for fighting itself. After that, he abandoned melee combat completely. He rebuilt his entire skill tree and equipment setup, focusing exclusively on magic warfare, area control, suppression, and devastating bombardment fueled by his absurd stats. That became Tiamat's style, the dragon magus who blanketed battlefields in magical carpet bombings. Even though his attacks were all magical bombardment, Tiamat's base stats were so overwhelmingly strong that a single proper strike often meant winning half the battle outright. After that he'd follow up with Wideria mana barrages, what people called his scorched earth tactics, and finish the job. If that didn't work, he simply lost. In fact, he'd been beaten badly several times when opponents countered the tactic. King Simba, and others famous in the guild for their PvP, had shown him how fragile his approach could be. When I looked him up, he was a pure human. King Simba had been the undisputed #1 close combat ranker in Yggdrasil, the world champion of melee. More than that, in real life he was a championship fighter too. Given that the world of combat sports is full of genetically enhanced fighters and those with augmentation procedures, the fact that a normal human took the title against such opponents was astonishing. Watching the footage, Tiamat had asked himself if that could really be a mere human's movement. So he gave up. His body wouldn't move properly, and his talent was below third rate. As a warrior, it was enough to land a single crushing blow, that sufficed. For PvE it was shockingly strong, and in guild warfare there was no need to duel up close. Still, until the server shut down, he never became adept at close combat. Of course, now all of that is just memory. While he slept, only weeks had passed in Tiamat's perception, but an incredibly long time had actually gone by while he dozed. 200 years, an incredible span of time. 2 centuries. It was absurd. Even looking outside at the 12-guild city, now renamed Shinshi, made the passage of time obvious. But this place felt untouched by the years. Not a speck of dust anywhere in the record repository. Thanks to preservation magic, it didn't feel like 200 years had passed. Everything remained as it had been. As long as the 12, or rather Shinshi, remained intact, this place would be preserved forever. If Tiamat, the sole ruler and newfound god of this city, decreed it, no one would dare object. Sigh. Looking at all of it, he could only sigh. He wasn't displeased to have fallen into this world. He now had a true body, not a virtual shell but an actual body. Even if it was originally a game character and not even human, being able to walk the world with his own legs was a tremendous blessing. And this world still had pristine nature. Compared to the awful cities of his original life, acid rain, heavy metals, smog so bad you had to wear gas masks, a life predetermined from birth, this world was paradise. He'd also brought back great power, and a powerful faction to boot. What reason did he have to complain? Still, a lingering regret remained. I wish others had come with me. As guildmaster and as one of the old leadership, he missed King Simba, Baron, Kakarot, and the other guildmates they used to roam with, Kellen, Hershan, Myelin, Inkrane, and many other fine friends in the 12. How wonderful it would have been to enjoy this world together, recklessly and carefree. But now only Tiamat remained here. There were NPCs, and there was Aya, an NPC who behaved so much like a player, but there were no true fellow players, no real kindred. Not a single one. Well, that wasn't entirely true. Ains Ul Gaun. There was an enemy in this world. Not just a local power, but an enemy from Yggdrasil itself, a powerful, terrifying opponent. Ains Ul Gaun, the most notorious DQN guild of Yggdrasil, a guild for heteromorphic species by heteromorphs, only heteromorphs. They were dangerous. Even their concept made them hostile, an evil-aligned guild that would not hesitate to do filthy things. Perhaps they might have reformed upon arriving in this world, but if they truly appreciated this place's beauty, if they wanted to cherish and preserve it, they wouldn't have launched a preemptive attack. Because of that, Monkey Spanner was ambushed and killed, and Dragon's Dream, the foothold and bait they'd left in this world, suffered a crippling loss. This cannot be overlooked. A 100 level NPC died and its equipment was looted. In Monkey Spanner's gear was the legacy left behind by one of the guild leaders, Kakarot. The moment that was pillaged, any hope of a peaceful relationship was gone. So Tiamat himself stepped in. He didn't yet know the enemy was Ains Ul Gaun, but operating on the premise that the foe might possess a world item, and knowing that only he, the strongest entity left among the 12, could realistically uncover the enemy's true identity, he took direct action. The plan succeeded. He discovered the opponent. It was Ains Ul Gaun. In the process Tiamat slew the enemy guild NPC Demiurgos, used the soul-eating serpent to seal its resurrection, and seized its items. As a bonus, he acquired the world item, Cup of Hygeia. Not a bad haul. But with that, Ains Ul Gaun would surely have noticed them. They must have realized we're the 12. Among the items taken from Monkey Spanner was the 12 Zodiac Ring, a guild item that allows teleportation into the guild. Of course Tiamat had the ring purged from the master source. Even if they still held the ring now, it could no longer teleport anyone into the guild. Still, the mere existence of that ring would alert Ains Ul Gaun to the presence of the 12. The 12 was a mega guild even more famous than Ains Ul Gaun. But Ains Ul Gaun probably hasn't yet realized the true extent of the 12's force. There is only one player in the 12 now, the Guildmaster Tiamat, the sole surviving player. That fact must never be revealed. They must not let the enemy know there is only a single player on their side. There was a time when Momonga used to talk with players who remained on the server, but now that Ains is an enemy, they absolutely must not exchange more information. They don't know how many players Ains still has. Momonga said some members hadn't returned for months, but who's to say a few didn't come back at the server's end? If, among them, there's the world champion who once fought King Simba tooth and nail, or someone like Herbert the magic caster of world disaster fame, it would be dangerous. If there are multiple players on the Ains side while the 12 has only one, no matter how solid the 12's NPC forces are, it could be impossible to withstand them. Therefore, before the enemy can gauge their strength, they must crush them first. War isn't what we want either, but there's no other choice now, Momonga. Now that they are enemies, Tiamat intends to smash them thoroughly. Before Ains Ul Gaun can learn the 12's true power, he plans to deliver the maximum possible blow and force them to the negotiating table. If they hole up in Ains's fortress, the impregnable Nazarick Great Underground Tomb, there will be nothing more they can do. Tiamat clenched the Cup of Hygeia, the item wrested from Demiurge, in his hand and ground his teeth. Thus, between the two powers who have now become aware of each other, war clouds finally began to gather. The Lord of the Death-commanding legions in the guise of a skeleton, the Overlord. The Lord of Dragons, a colossal dark dragon who rules all Ains. A clash of forces capable of shaking the world itself, even destroying it. Which way this struggle will go, no one in this other world could yet predict. 93. Will the World Dragon and the Overlord shake the new world? 1. Chapter 93. Will the World Dragon and the Overlord shake the new world? 1. Step. Tiamat walked down the long corridor. He possessed the Zodiac Ring, an item that allowed him to teleport to any point within the guild. Yet, he intentionally chose to walk. As he retraced the path he once traveled with his comrades, he occasionally let his eyes drift toward the relics those guild members left behind. But his face remained stiff and unmoving, his gaze fixed straight ahead into the pitch-black dark. Nothing filled the air, only darkness, empty and endless. Eventually, Tiamat suddenly spoke. Aya, will you listen to something I want to say for a moment? There was no one there. Naturally, there should have been no response. But to that seemingly one-sided murmur, a voice answered. Yes, Master. Aya, an NPC created by Tiamat himself. She was the system administrator of the Guild 12 Guardians, the one bound to the Guild's ultimate weapon, and a being who could be called a fragment of a world-class item itself. Within the city of Shinshi, the former guild, her knowledge was nearly omniscient. And always, her gaze belonged to her one and only master. Good, Tiamat muttered. What I'm about to say is nothing more than a private complaint. Something I cannot allow the priests, the citizens, or any of the people of Shinshi to hear. I want you to listen to it, and then keep it to yourself. I understand. This Aya will obey any command you give, Master. Thank you. Then, he paused for a moment, visibly hesitant, before slowly opening his mouth again. Aya, you know, don't you? I am not truly a being of Yggdrasil. In fact, none of us are. Not me, and not anyone else who isn't an NPC. Yes, Tiamat, and the other players, were never originally part of Yggdrasil. The world they had once freely enjoyed was something designed, built, and governed by someone else, just a fictional stage. Their bodies, their forms, their powers, everything inside the game was merely a shell. Their souls were never born in Yggdrasil. Their minds existed in reality. The laws they followed in Yggdrasil were merely rules of a game. Their values, habits, and sense of life remained anchored in the real world. Even those who lost themselves in Yggdrasil, who treated reality as the fake world and swore to live only inside the game, still had bodies chained to reality. To most of us, Yggdrasil was just a resting place. A temporary sanctuary to relieve our exhausted minds. Some, like me, did spend more time here than in the real world, some even devoted their whole hearts to this place. But even so, it doesn't change the truth. We were never born of this world. Do you understand me, Aya? Yes, I do understand. Oh, and how do you know that? Because, Master, the previous guild leaders and members spoke of it. We remember the conversations they left behind. Aya remembered. All the NPCs did. The era when the guild shone brightest, their memories of that age remained like faded pages of a diary. Log upon log of guild chat and recorded dialogue, rigid data, yet embedded in the NPCs, minds like old memories. We remember that we are NPCs. We remember that you and the other guild members were players. That you did not live inside Yggdrasil permanently, but returned to the place called reality. And eventually, when some of you never returned, we understood you had severed all connection with this world. Since when did you begin to realize that? Around 150 years ago, perhaps. We became capable of such thoughts 200 years ago, but it took time to organize those fragments of knowledge. Then the others, the NPCs. They all know this as well. No. Only a limited number of NPCs possess the capacity for that level of thought. The 12 high priests, the 3 chief governors, and those of level 80 or higher. Altogether, the number does not exceed 50. 50, is it? Tiamat's eyes widened slightly. 50. That was more than he had expected. Were there truly that many NPCs at level 80 or above still within the city? Although he had spent a long period as the sole guild master after everyone else left, it was impossible to micromanage thousands of NPCs alone. Beyond the 12 closest retainers, the rest had been, for the most part, left alone unless major incidents demanded his attention. 50, a small number, if small. A large number, if large. But every one of them remains loyal, to Shinshi, and to you, Master. That much, I know. NPCs are absolutely loyal to me. That is correct, isn't it? Yes. Every resident of Shinshi would gladly obey you. Even if you commanded them to throw away their lives, all of them would smile and willingly accept it. Willingly smile as they die, huh? So they can think, they can reason, and yet their loyalty ran as deeply as it did back in Yggdrasil. That part had not changed at all. In Yggdrasil, such loyalty was often exploited. NPCs with powerful stats were used as living shields, suicide vanguards, or taught difficult spells with long cast times simply to serve as strategic tools. One of the most famous examples was from the Rabbitfolk Guild Master, Bunny Girl. The custom NPC she crafted, Kagaya, had been an exception among exceptions, capable of using supertier magic through sheer design and customization. So, Master, you need not worry. Our loyalty is eternal and absolute. There will never be a case where we voluntarily rebel against you. Voluntarily, you say. Does that mean involuntary rebellion is possible? Yes. It is theoretically possible. Certain types of world-class mind control, illusion-type world items, or extreme situations involving captivity or catastrophic resistance loss could leave even us vulnerable. In such cases, there are rare divine class artifacts and super-tier spells, such as World of Hallucination, or perhaps even the 10th tier spell Mind Control, that might affect us. I see. Something to keep in mind. Such methods existed in the game, or rather, existed in the world that had been a game. Tiamat shook his head, brushing away the thought before it derailed him. Then what about me, Aya? Do you believe such control could work on me? No. I believe no such ability would work on you, Master. To begin with, you hold world-class items, and therefore, you are immune to the effects of other world items. Furthermore, as a dragon, you possess overwhelming resistance and innate magic defense. Even super-tier spells would do little more than graze your mind at best. However, if you were ever captured physically, then, I would have no reassurances to offer. Good. That's enough. Even in the old world, where players far stronger than him roamed, Tiamat had died before, but not once had he ever been captured. Regardless of who the opponent might be, he never allowed himself to be restrained. But this situation was different now. He was preparing for war. Back then, he had comrades. Back then, even solitude still took place in a world with logins and logouts. But now, he commanded alone. And yet, he was no longer truly alone. There were NPCs who lived, breathed, and moved at his side. Aya. Yes, Master. Tell me, do I look normal to you right now? Normal. What do you mean, Master? Tiamat could not see her face, but Aya's voice carried faint bewilderment. Toward that unseen presence, he spoke honestly. She was his creation, his NPC, yet in truth, she was no different from a child to him. And because of that, she was the only one he could bare his heart to without restraint. I have become afraid. Afraid. Master, you, afraid. Of what? Of all of this. Tiamat closed his eyes, recalling the not so distant past. When he had first awakened, though to him it felt like only moments, his return to consciousness was met not by sunlight or voices, but by a report, the death of Monkey Spanner. His first reaction was fury. Someone had dared to lay hands on what was his. But that anger was quickly swept aside by something far more overwhelming, terror. For the NPCs were moving, thinking, and speaking as true living beings. Then came shock at learning that 200 years had passed while he slumbered, and that the world he had awakened to was neither reality nor Yggdrasil, but a completely different new world. Afterward, he had raged at Aya, interrogating her, demanding answers, but in truth, that anger had been born from fear. At first, I was terrified. Terrified of every change, and terrified of all of you who stood beside me. The world had changed. He had changed. And even worse, the NPCs, who were never supposed to be more than elaborate data, stood before him as real, thinking beings. The unknown swallowed him in a dread so deep he could barely breathe. He hid that fear, because if they sensed it, if they realized their master feared them, would they still obey him? And so he bluffed. He barked. He forced himself to act with aggression and control, because otherwise he might not have been able to move at all. But in time, that fear faded. Because you were still mine. My guild. My people. That much had not changed. When the fear finally lifted, what replaced it was relief, because Shinshi, its NPCs, and everything in it lay firmly within the palm of his hand, just as it had in the game. Once he understood that, he relaxed. And then, with reckless relief, he made another choice. And then, I wanted to see the world. It had been foolish, he knew that. But he wanted it too badly to regret it. In reality, he had never been able to leave his home. In Yggdrasil, he could only dream of walking freely. Now he had a body that moved, a body with strength. He wished to walk, to breathe, to see, to feel. And so despite the lurking danger, he went. I indulged myself. And it was wonderful. Fresh air, clean water, untouched lands. A world so beautiful that, if heaven existed, it might look like this. Tiamat had been captivated, fully, helplessly captivated. And as he wandered, he met people. Colton, Rohaim, Dean, dwarves, dragons, countless races and voices, each alive in a way that was never possible in a game. And slowly, he could no longer deny the truth. This world was real. And when I realized that, I became afraid again. Because this world is not Yggdrasil. With Monkey Spanner's death, he resolved to find the culprit and avenge him. But when vengeance drew near, fear returned. In this world, death is not a mechanic. Even if resurrection exists, that does not erase the reality of dying. He feared the weight of it, of battles and orders that would truly cost lives. He feared that at his command, hundreds or thousands would march to their deaths without hesitation. But most terrifying of all, is that I am no longer disturbed by it. That I can think, command, and kill without flinching. But now, the current me believes that if sacrifice is necessary, then it must be made. That no matter the cost, I must achieve the objective, even if others must be cast aside to reach it. Such thinking was arrogant, cruel. A mindset the real him, the him from reality, would never have allowed himself to possess. And that was why he feared himself. His thoughts were no longer those of the old Tiamat, nor of the broken human he once was. His instincts were now shaped by the game, by a logic that saw war and death as strategy, even though here, the consequences were irreversible. One order, one command, could mean ruin. Yet, he no longer recoiled from that truth. Even so, he chose war. Because retreat was no longer an option. And I am not alone. I cannot decide everything solely by my own weakness. He was the last remaining player of the 12, the lone master of Shinshi, the one and only guild leader left. For their sake, for the legacy of his comrades, he could not flee. He had to stand. He had to choose. Inside him, two voices clashed. One voice whispered, "This isn't right. This isn't who you are." The other commanded, "Crush your enemies. Burn down anything that stands in the way. Achieve the objective, no matter the cost." Both voices were him. Yet they rejected each other, tearing him in two. And so Tiamat's heart was thrown into endless turmoil. But then, Aya smiled gently, as though consoling a child. "It is all right, master." Her whisper was soft, warm, even. "As I have already said, everything we are belongs to you. Whatever you choose, we shall follow. Then you truly have no will of your own. If I command it, will you simply obey without question? Yes. If you order with finality, we will obey as we always have. But if you do not wish that, if you desire our thoughts as beings rather than tools, then they will speak. They will act. They will think. Just as they have for the past 200 years. I see." Tiamat exhaled a faint laugh. His mind was still in chaos. His choices still frightened him. His conviction wavered. But if it was not only his burden to carry, if there were others to speak and decide with him, then at the very least, he would hear them. That was enough for now. Then I will listen to all of your voices. The final decision will come only after. At some point during their talk, his feet had stopped. Before him stood a massive door, leading to the council chamber. Tiamat raised his hand, and with a single quiet knock. Goo. The colossal doors parted, stone grinding against stone, and the chamber revealed itself. Beyond the threshold sat a great round table. There, 12 beastkin, the 12 high priests, rose from their seats in unison. No words. No noise. Only movement. And then, as one, they bowed deeply, lowering their heads with absolute reverence, offering their master the highest form of respect their bodies could express. 94. Side story not connected to the main story. Chapter 94. Side story not connected to the main story. Tiamat dreamed. It was a dream overflowing with happiness. Guildmasters and guild members who had long since gone their separate ways returned one by one. To commemorate their final day, an enormous festival was held. Everyone gathered to celebrate the end of Yggdrasil, reminiscing about the joyful days of the 12, sparing neither resources nor items for the occasion. Thousands of guild members danced and laughed, and in perfect harmony, thousands of NPCs served and entertained them. It was the 12 at its peak, the radiant, golden age he thought he would never see again. As Tiamat gazed upon that scene, his eyes glimmered with emotion. Memories of joy. Memories of youth. Memories he wanted desperately to return to. Everything he had ever longed for was there before him. And so, if this was a dream, then let it never end, let it continue for eternity. With that prayer in his heart, Tiamat melted into the crowd, letting himself be swept away by the warmth of fellowship and the intoxication of celebration. Tear, master. Please, wake up. But all beginnings must someday meet their end. Something kept tapping at him, annoying, insistent. Tiamat frowned. What? Leave me alone. Don't interrupt this. Don't take this happiness from me. But the voice grew louder, and the tapping more forceful. Tiamatson. Wake up, please. Stop it. Don't drag me away. He shouted inwardly. And then, the world began to crack. Black fissures ripped through the castle. The parade tore apart. Guild members scattered like dust in a storm. Guildmasters vanished one by one, fading with gentle smiles. NPCs shattered into fragments, collapsing like broken puppets across the ground. Tiamat reached out desperately, trying to piece it all back together. But he couldn't touch them. His hands would not reach. His strength was not enough. No. Come back. Please. Please. Please don't leave me alone again. Left kneeling in a pitch-black void, Tiamat lowered his head, drowning in despair. He opened his eyes. A heavy, bittersweet feeling clung to his chest, like he had just lost something precious and irreplaceable. He had dreamed of something warm, something joyful, something that vanished like foam on water. He wanted to close his eyes again and savor the fading warmth. But before he could, a voice snapped sharply at his ear, pulling him back to reality. Hey! I said wake up already, Tiamatson. What? Who's interrupting a man's good dream at the best part? Annoyed, Tiamat groaned and squinted, only for his eyes to fly wide open at the sight in front of him. Huh. Momonga-san. Yes. It's me, Momonga. Standing there was a familiar skeletal avatar, one he had not expected to see. Any trace of drowsiness vanished instantly. Wait, what? Momonga-san, why are you here? That's my question. Where in the world is this place? What? Tiamat blinked in confusion, stunned. Momonga sounded just as bewildered. For a moment, neither could process what was happening. The dream was gone, but what stood before him now was something far stranger. Tiamat lifted his head, and he immediately realized his perspective was considerably higher than before. Huh. What is? Whoa. Wah. Kudong. As Tiamat raised his head and pushed himself up, a tremor rippled out as if an earthquake had struck. When he planted his foot, the ground shook, and a spreading wave of powerful, pitch-black magic overwhelmed and withered every plant, insect, and living thing nearby. The black, oppressive mana radiated outward in concentric circles, and it even struck Momonga standing right beside him. Momonga, however, was largely unaffected. His own passive aura, the aura of despair, naturally cancelled out the effects of Tiamat's intimidation. Still, the aftereffects were alarming enough that Momonga panicked and shouted. Tiamatson. Turn off the passive aura. Turn off your intimidation. Huh. Passive aura, how do I turn it off, Momonga-san? The menu won't pop up. Now that you mention it, it's not showing up for me either. Momonga echoed him and then turned pale himself. What was going on? Their bodies looked like game characters, yet no menu window appeared. What the heck? While they fussed, a huge dragon nearby thumped and hollered even louder. Huh. Where'd my body go? That's a dragon. Wait, Momonga's a skeleton here. Is the Yggdrasil service not shut down yet? I was definitely logged out at the guild hall at shutdown, so where is this place? Exactly. I was in the guild hall until shutdown too. Quar. Kuding. Pajijik. Quad. With the skeleton and the dragon, two transcendent beings, panicking and running amok, the surrounding area began to crack, collapse, and become devastated just from the shockwaves. Ah. Tiamatson. Please calm down. That's causing an earthquake. No, Momonga-san, you calm down. Your aura of despair is turning everything into sand. Gasp. Watch your step. You nearly stepped on something. Eek. Tiamatson, watch your foot. Despite knowing what was happening, neither of them could do anything but stand there stunned, and for a while they leveled the neighborhood. Because of that, a few small tribes of Ainfolk living not far below ground were knocked out or foaming at the mouth from the tremendous pressure that rippled out, but fortunately their lives weren't in danger. Phew, it finally settled down somehow. Yeah. Tiamat wiped sweat from his brow as if exhausted. At some point, his massive draconic form had returned to a human shape. Thanks to one of the 3 world items he always kept, no, was it now 4, the item he made most practical use of, Tarnhelm, he had changed his race from a huge, unwieldy dragon into a humanoid form. Momonga watched that transformation with obvious envy. To anyone else it probably only looked like a terrifying pair of glowing red eyes, but the longing was clear. That's still really enviable. Tarnhelm. Tiamat, will you trade it? Our guild has a lot of world items, I could give you one of them. No thanks. Maybe if you gave me 2. Or I'd swap it for a ring of 20. No, that's. Then don't. Momonga let out a long sigh. He really wanted that item, but trading 2 world items, or worse, a top 20 inches artifact, for just one was absurd. Sure, Tarnhelm was an incredible racial shift item and a collector's treasure, but no matter how much he desired it, that deal was daylight robbery. Well, putting that aside, where are we, exactly, Momanga-san? I'd like to know that too, Tiamat-san. Where in the world are we? No idea. Tiamat swept his gaze across the landscape. The land they had just devastated was cracked, barren, and cratered as though a battlefield had torn through it. Yet beyond the ruined zone, his sharp eyes spotted something else. There was nature. Grass swayed. Wildflowers bloomed. Trees stood in clusters, and beyond them, hills, forests, mountains, and tiny creatures moved about, bugs, small animals, all signs of a living ecosystem. It looked like a Yggdrasil forest field at first glance, but something felt off. His instincts told him this wasn't it. Something's strange, Momanga-san. I can smell things. Smell. Well, yes, I smell things too, but that's the strange part. In Yggdrasil, normal field areas had no scent, right? Unless you were in that special swamp zone your guild occupied, there shouldn't be any smell at all. That's true. So why can we smell anything? After thinking for a moment, Tiamat crouched and touched the ground. He felt the sand slipping through his pale fingers. The gritty, granular sensation was too vivid, too real to be a mere VR haptic feedback. In reality, his ruined nerves would never allow him to feel something like this again. Yet here it was. Sand. Texture. Pressure. Temperature. And then, he pinched a bit of dirt and put it in his mouth. Tiamat-san. Why are you eating dirt? Pth. Blech. It tastes like dirt, Momanga-san. Well, of course it tastes like dirt, you ate dirt. No, I mean it actually tastes like dirt, Momanga-san. What? Momanga had been about to retort, but suddenly froze. A realization struck him like lightning. A surge of emotion welled up, only to be instantly crushed by his automatic emotional suppression, forcing his thoughts back into icy calm. His red eyelights widened. It has taste. Are you certain? Yes. I can taste it. In Yggdrasil, there was no taste content whatsoever. In Yggdrasil, taste was a forbidden sense, disabled to prevent psychological dependence and addiction. Only sight, sound, limited smell, and dampened touch were permitted. There were no flavors, no matter what one ate. At best, wealthy elites used illegal sensory rigs to simulate taste, but that was never part of official gameplay. Yet here, dirt tasted like dirt. Salty, dry, unpleasant, unmistakably real. Which could only mean one thing. Momanga-san. Tiamat-san. The two stared at each other, stunned. What do we do now? I don't know. Tiamat slowly sank to the ground, overwhelmed. This place wasn't Yggdrasil. It wasn't reality either, not with this draconic body and functioning magic items. The shock was too great. For a moment, he simply gave up trying to think at all. However, Momanga couldn't fall apart, not even if he wanted to. No matter the shock, his undead trait emotional suppression forcibly stabilized his mind over and over again. Thanks to that, he could still think clearly and assess reality with cold logic. Tiamat-san. Yes, Momanga-san. For now, how about we figure out what this world is? What? We don't know where this is, and we don't know what kind of world we're in, but we are here now. We can't just sit and stare at the dirt forever, right? Normally, he would not have taken the lead so assertively. But having a companion at his side, and seeing that companion shaken, pushed Momanga to step forward. Of course, it also helped that his emotions were being forcefully suppressed, keeping him calm, yet the presence of someone who needed direction gave him real resolve. You're right, we don't know where we are, but at least our bodies work, our items function, and it doesn't look like we're going to drop dead in a ditch somewhere. True. Though, in my case, I don't know if I could die, even if I wanted to. I am undead, after all. PFF'd, Momanga-san, was that supposed to be a joke? Let's call it, half a joke. Ha. Tiamat let out a small, helpless laugh and rose to his feet. In the form of a young boy, he stood, then lifted a hand to the crown upon his head, channeling a command through its power. His body swelled like an inflating balloon, and then burst outward, covered in glossy black scales. In moments, his small frame expanded into a colossal beast. Where a boy once stood, a massive black dragon now loomed, like a living fortress of obsidian. He opened a maw large enough to swallow a carriage. In that case, climb on, Momanga-san. Tiamat-san, are you sure you can fly? If this isn't Yggdrasil. I feel like I can. Call it instinct. And if items, magic, and skills still work, flying shouldn't be an issue. Yes, you can fly on your own, Momanga-san, but I'm faster in the air. If we want to scout the area, riding me will be quicker. No matter how large this world is, I'll fly us all the way past the stars if I have to. Let's not go that far. For now, just the upper atmosphere, please. The skeletal magic caster landed atop the dragon's massive back, grinning, well, as much as a skull could grin. Seeing that, the dragon tilted his enormous head and grinned back. Very well. I'll take us up. Hold on tight, Momonga-san. Of course. Tiamat-san, let's see how fast you can fly. With pleasure. I've been curious myself, honestly. Tiamat drew in a deep flood of mana. Black streams of aura surged out, cloaking his gigantic frame as his wings spread wide. With a single mighty flap, he launched himself skyward. The force of the takeoff was like a rocket blast, tearing up the ground below a second time as a shockwave erupted outward. Then, like a streak of black lightning, the dragon shot toward the heavens. That day, a skeletal magic caster and an obsidian dragon, beings who could shake worlds, descended upon a new land. The roar that echoed across the continent became a proclamation. A new force had arrived, one powerful enough to shake the world to its core. 95 When I opened my eyes after returning 1. Chapter 95. When I opened my eyes after returning 1. For over 200 years, the 12 high priests who governed the city of gods, Shinshi, once the federated nation of guilds called the Zodiac, on behalf of the beloved deity they venerated, had long awaited this day. It has been a long wait. They had hoped, day after day, that their beloved god would someday return and rule Shinshi once more. Though they were managing affairs well enough, in recent times they worried constantly, was it right to act so freely while their lord slumbered? Might their behavior offend the master's sensibilities? Each day felt like sitting on a bed of nails. But all those anxious, sleepless days ended only a week ago. All priests, prepare to greet our one and only, our absolute master, our revered lord. A week earlier, Ea, the oracle of the god and the de facto supreme authority of the city of gods in the deity's absence, had conveyed that message to every priest. That day, the priests could barely contain their joy. Their revered god was finally awakening and returning to them. They could not announce it publicly, so they spent every day in restless anticipation. They wanted to rush to the presence of their Lord, to bow before that majesty, to apologize for the years gone by and beg forgiveness, but Ea forbade them from acting on impulse. The god wished, upon waking, simply to savor the sight of this world and enjoy it for the first time. They were not to disturb that delight. Even if it might be dangerous, as in the days of Yggdrasil, this was the god's play. With that injunction, the priests kept their impatience in check and waited for the Lord's return. And recently, their god personally identified the presence of an enemy, slew one of that enemy's lackeys with his own hand, and sealed it away. Seeing that, the 6 priests who were there gazed at the divine seat and, overcome with emotion, wept. And now, at this very moment, as the god opened the gate that had been firmly sealed for over 2 centuries and stepped out, overwhelmed with rapture and awe beyond words, the 12 priests bowed their heads and pressed their foreheads to the ground in unison. West Priest, Kima. Priest of War, Tauros. Guardian Priest, Lion. Earth Priest, Kagaya. Dragon Priest, Drake. Death Priest, Orochi. Demon Priest, Holstein. Sheep Priest, Mary. Primordial Priest, Monkey Spanner. Celestial Priest, Pride. Dog Priest, Hattie. Treasure Priest, Palkai. All 12 priests, not one missing, gathered and bowed to the god. Though not in the fearsome dragon form they had last seen, his bearing, his aura, and the very essence from which he was made convinced every one of them without doubt. This being was their god, their master, their unique sovereign. Tiamat glanced over them, then took his place at the seat prepared for him and flicked his hand lightly. Everyone, rise and take your seats. Yes. The 12 priests rose in response and sat in their original places, not randomly, but in the old order that had been used 2 centuries ago. From Kima the West Priest through Palkai the Treasure Priest, they sat around the round table, each gazing toward their god as if by mutual agreement. Tiamat looked each of them over carefully, as if committing their faces to memory, then spoke. The reason I gathered you all today is, first, to apologize. Apologize. For what? What are you saying? Silence. Lion and Tauros both shouted out in their agitation, but before they could finish, a thunderous shout cut through the hall. All eyes turned to the source. Drake, who had been about to shout himself, ground his teeth and said, "The god is speaking. Lion, Tauros, have you forgotten all reverence for the god during these 200 years? Shut your mouths and bow your heads at once. I would punish you here and now, but the god is seated, punishment for you will be decided by the god. We are sorry, O Lord. We ask for your forgiveness, please kill us. When the two priests bowed and pleaded guilty, the fervor in the others died down. Though their faces were filled with emotion, Drake's intervention restored order, they clenched their mouths and suppressed the rising feelings. Tiamat kept his expression stern and continued. Enough. I will not punish you for that. Besides, I am the one who must apologize. For leaving you to your own devices for 200 years. My God, but that is. This is something I must apologize to you for, an inescapable responsibility. Will all of you accept my apology? Tiamat rose from the head seat and bowed deeply toward the round table. The sight struck the 12 high priests like an unexpected blow. The god bowed. Such a thing should never happen. Yet the shock was so overwhelming that none of them could even form words. While they remained frozen, Tiamat straightened once more and spoke. If this apology alone is not enough, then I am willing to take further responsibility. For example, I could step down from my position here and now. That is utterly unthinkable. The very same Drake who had scolded Lion and Tauros earlier now shouted louder than both of them. But this time, no one silenced him. In fact, the others began to shout their agreement, rising to their feet. That's right. There is no need for our God to apologize. We never once considered the last 200 years a burden. I agree. Even while you slept, we believed you were always with us. The same is true for me, my lord. Please, I beg of you, take those words back. All 12 high priests cried out at once, like a chaotic clamor, but their hearts were sincere. The thought of the god stepping down, right after finally returning, was unbearable. They would sooner rip out their own hearts than watch such a thing happen. I see. Then I will abandon the notion of stepping down. Thank you, my lord. They bowed again, so deeply it was almost frantic. To an outsider, their dramatic reactions might have looked clownish, but there was no exaggeration in their feelings. Every word and movement from their god made their hearts soar or sink as if their lives hung upon it. Then let us put that matter aside. In truth, I must also offer praise, for the 200 years you ruled in my stead. That is too much. We cannot accept such kindness. Once again, all 12 bowed, but repeating the same gesture again and again quickly made even Tiamat's youthful face crease with irritation. That is enough. Must you object every time? No, my lord. But for us, who presumptuously ruled Shinshi for 200 years in your absence, to be praised instead of condemned, it is difficult to bear. Drake bowed his head again. For 2 centuries, they had ruled the city of gods. Worse, they had even renamed it Shinshi. It was blasphemy. Servants taking the master's domain and even changing its name. Despite the circumstances, the guilt never left them. But Tiamat remained calm. It does not matter. You governed the city well. I have heard that the population has grown and the vaults overflow with coin and artifacts, more than before we came to this world. For that, I have no intention of rebuking you. Instead, I commend you. Ooh, my God. All 12 priests trembled with emotion, tears flowing freely. The spiritual anguish, worry, and doubt they had endured for 2 centuries, the recognition of their God washed it all away at once. He acknowledged them. He forgave them. He praised them. To others, it might seem a small reward. But to them, it was everything. Their eternal Lord had returned, and he approved. That alone was worth more than heaven and earth. Then, Tiamat's tone shifted. For 200 years, you have worked hard, my priests. I would dearly love to sit and hear every detail of what you have experienced and accomplished, but before we enjoy such luxuries, there is a threat we must address. One that now stands before us and before Shinshi. The 12 priests looked up. Tiamat smiled. It was the face of a young, strikingly beautiful boy, but behind him, like a mirage, the vast jaws of a dragon seemed to open, radiating a terrible majesty. Asterisk 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 asterisk. If you want to read 10 advanced chapters ahead, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/vanity01.